UAE is now free to produce and ship much more oil as much as it wants. In fact, damage during the 2-week war here has limited some production. And the United Arab Emirates has declared a ruthless oil war on the Tehran regime by tearing down 60 years of cartel order. Without firing a single bullet, without launching a single missile, just with a signature. There are no more production limits, no more caps. And with the UAE's exit from OPEC effective May 1st, 2026, the IRGC's biggest leverage card is gone. The Iranian regime is taking this blow at its most vulnerable moment. Even OPEC today is different from OPEC yesterday. OPEC has been around for 70 years. We joined OPEC 60 years ago. It is the different OPEC that we have today. Today, OPEC is taken over by 2 countries, and I am not allowing a fair share to everybody else. The Strait of Hormuz is under American blockade. Kag Island tanks are at 12 days of storage capacity. The regime is currently begging its own people to cut their electricity and energy consumption in half. The real target of this oil strike is not the regime's center. It is the Revolutionary Guards. The truly lethal detail behind the UAE's strategic maneuver is the full capacity activation of the FUJAIRAH pipeline, physically bypassing the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's "we will close the strait" threat, used recklessly for years against the Western world and regional rivals, has been rendered invalid in a single move, thanks to this approximately 400-kilometer modern infrastructure project. This massive line, which provides a safe flow directly from Abu Dhabi to the Sea of Oman, is moving roughly 1.8 million barrels of oil per day, completely outside Iran's mining and harassment range. The regime's doctrine of holding the global economy hostage by closing the strait has been openly debunked on the ground by the UAE's independent supply chain offensive. And what do you make of the decision to leave OPEC? We have the capacity for 5 million, and we are not allowed to eat it. And I think we had enough of it. This is one reason for it. The strategic value of this bypass move is not limited to safe oil transport. It also zeroes out Iran's naval military deterrence. The Revolutionary Guards Navy's fast attack boats and submarine fleet will no longer be able to find the Western or Gulf origin critical tankers in the narrow waters of Hormuz. This logistical shift effectively renders the coastal defense systems and anti-ship missiles, into which the regime poured billions of dollars, blind and deaf. The shift of tanker traffic to the Sea of Oman into the wider waters under the direct protective umbrella of the American Fifth Fleet makes the IRGC's piracy operations impossible. The enormous operational freedom provided by the FUJAIRAH line carries the UAE to the position of the region's undisputed energy leader, while demolishing Iran's regional hegemony dreams. The Tehran leadership, which for years offered fake displays of power on television screens shouting, "We will close the strait! We will freeze the world!" will no longer be able to use this cheap rhetoric. The Strait of Hormuz is no longer a power projection zone for Iran. It is a cursed waterway where its own oil is trapped and rotting. It is now inevitable that any crisis in the Strait of Hormuz will hit Iran rather than the UAE or its Western allies, because Iran has no alternative route for exporting its oil. This asymmetric transformation means that Tehran's biggest geopolitical card has been reduced to an ordinary bluff, and the regime has fallen into a trap that boomerangs back on itself. In this context, it is highly likely that the Strait of Hormuz will turn from a force multiplier into a passive route, where Iran's own energy resources are confined to a logistical bottleneck. This strategic narrowing may weaken internal authority and create psychological ground for social mobilization. This is a massive hammer coming down on the income backbone of the Iranian regime, on the IRGC's proxy financing, and on the dictatorship that uses Hormuz as a weapon. The nightmare doesn't end with the regime being disarmed at the strait. The real disaster is preparing to explode where the oil that cannot move accumulates. The storage crisis erupting at Iran's main export terminals on Kag Island is the most concrete and devastating indicator of the perfect logistical suffocation the regime is in. Due to the relentless American blockade on the sea lanes, Iran's capacity to deliver its produced oil to world markets erodes with each passing second. Intelligence analyses are clear. The IRGC's physical storage capacity can hold out for at most 12 more days. After that, the entire system will lock down. The tanks reaching 100% will mean production must be forcibly halted, and this will initiate a massive infrastructure collapse cascade. This blockage carrying a daily revenue loss potential of hundreds of millions of dollars, will push the regime's budget deficits to irreparable levels and drag the state into total chaos. This break in the logistics chain will create a domino effect, directly shattering all real-line resistance and rapidly fueling the internal panic atmosphere across state ranks. In an environment where UAE oil is rapidly entering the market to fill the global gap, leaving Iranian oil to rot in tanks is one of the heaviest geo-economic defeats in history. The regime is completely trapped. Neither diplomatic maneuvering room nor military capacity remains. The forced shutdown of oil wells is not just a temporary production halt. It is an extremely costly and dangerous technical collapse process, from which return is, engineering-wise, highly difficult. Reopening pressure-losing wells will turn into a near-impossible engineering nightmare for Iran due to years of worn-out infrastructure and lack of technology. The excessive saturation in storage tanks is turning the facilities on Karg Island into massive time bombs. In any potential military strike, this multiplies the scale of the disaster. The ghost fleet tankers that the regime is desperately trying to keep afloat in the oceans are now filled to the brim. They have become floating targets, waiting aimlessly in the middle of the sea. America's Titan satellite tracking and sanction threats have completely closed off the escape routes for this smuggler fleet, making port docking or cargo unloading impossible. The inability to convert oil to cash brings deadly internal security risks. The IRGC failing to cover operational expenses, security forces' wages going unpaid. A military whose economic artery has been severed cannot, even at the most basic level, defend its own headquarters, let alone project threats outward. This is military doctrine. This perfect blockade strategy has condemned Iran's war machine to dissolve within its own borders, fried in its own oil. The enormous pressure created by the storage crisis is deepening the cracks within the Iranian leadership like never before, accelerating internal reckonings. Senior officials lie to the public, while in private meetings they are practically begging American and Pakistani diplomats for concessions. This is the clearest proof of how desperate the regime has become. The Tehran administration, which arrogantly walked away from the negotiation table twice, has entered a deep collapse psychology after realizing President Trump will not back down and the blockade will continue. Trump's tactic is working flawlessly, rushing nothing, simply letting the blockade do its work, rotting Iran from the inside. Regime leaders will either sign a humiliating surrender agreement in front of their people, or they will turn the country into a complete economic wreck and bury themselves in history. The power struggle among Iran's different power centers is increasingly evolving into a bloody reckoning because of shrinking resources. Revolutionary Guards commanders are fighting each other over the last crumbs of the cake, while the governability of the state is completely disappearing. This institutional disintegration, caused by economic paralysis, clearly proves that the regime is counting not its days, but its hours. While commanders fight over crumbs of cake at the palace, the only thing offered to the people on the street is a bill discount for sitting in the dark. The unprecedented panic state the regime finds itself in is tragically surfacing through irrational, absurd, and desperate decisions in domestic politics. The Iranian deputy energy minister, offering households a 30% bill discount for reducing electricity consumption, is the clearest example of complete disconnect from economic reality. While the state treasury has no cash to even pay civil servant salaries, and the energy infrastructure is on the verge of collapse, this carrot, offered to the people, proves the administration has lost the capacity to manage chaos. Such populist policies, completely contrary to fundamental economic rules, are nothing more than trying to fool the public with irrational incentives instead of raising prices to suppress demand. These desperate steps openly insult the intelligence of Iranians on the street, and far from calming social anger, rapidly fuel the fire of rebellion by displaying the regime's helplessness. The clear bankruptcy of the state's promise of protection, welfare, and the most basic public services has irreparably severed the thin bond of trust between the people and the regime. No one believes these fake discount promises. On the contrary, everyone is making their own survival plan, aware of the approaching storm and the dark days ahead. This mental breakdown is the official record of the Iranian government slipping out of state rationality and turning into an unskilled gang only trying to save the day. This economic delirium is dragging not only the citizen on the street, but also the elite class and the bureaucracy, considered the heart of the regime, into a deep, dead end. With infrastructure collapse, factories have come to a halt, supply chains have broken, and access to even basic food items has become a luxury. The regime is wasting its declining revenues by funding still failing proxy forces or trying to keep its nuclear dreams alive instead of investing in the welfare of its people. This distorted prioritization deepens the gap between pragmatic commanders and radical ideologues within the IRGC, creating an open mutiny risk. It is highly likely that security forces who don't get paid will lay down their weapons or join the side of the people during a popular uprising tomorrow, instead of defending the regime. History is full of countless examples of dictatorships whose economies collapsed being toppled by their own guards. And Iran will not be an exception to this rule. The desperation is so profound that Treasury officials are planning shameful economic wrath operations, like converting IRGC crypto funds into frozen foods. An army that should strike fear into its enemies trying to find food on the black market is the most dramatic proof that the system has completely rotted and is on the verge of collapse. These tragicomic flailings of the regime trying to engineer society are actually an effort to muffle the footsteps of an enormous incoming wave of civil disobedience. Telling the people, "Do not use electricity," is equivalent to a bitter confession saying, "Let industrial production stop. Let hospitals not work. Let life stop." The Iranian people, already fed up with decades of oppression, corruption, and ideological imposition, are clearly seeing that the last penny in their pockets is being destroyed in these meaningless wars. The young generation, isolated from the world, crushed under inflation, and left without a future, is blaming the religious leader and the Revolutionary Guards directly for the bill. Without even needing American military operation, this enormous social bomb, ready to detonate from within, is the real and biggest threat that will shake the foundations of the regime. The UAE's oil war has become the last and most critical geo-economic spark, lighting the fuse of this social bomb. For a structure that has no vision or resources left to offer its people, surviving by oppression alone is unsustainable in the dynamics of the modern age. It is highly likely that the rebellion plans whispered in the streets of Tehran will soon turn into an unstoppable chaos flood with the participation of millions. While the people go hungry on the streets, far away the proxy forces, kept afloat by Tehran feeding them billions of dollars, also have empty pockets. The main artery is no longer bleeding, it is drying up. When the main artery is cut, parasites die within seconds. Hezbollah and the Houthis, with the funds from Tehran severed like a knife, are literally being abandoned to starvation. This oil strike to the heart of Iran's economy is directly the financial death warrant of the IRGC's proxy network that has been bloodying the Middle East. In southern Lebanon, Hezbollah militants, crushed under the relentless air and drone strikes carried out one after another by the Israel Defense Forces, can no longer receive any logistical support from headquarters. The dramatic drop in oil revenues and the knife-sharp cutoff in cash flow result in the militants' wages going unpaid and their weapons depots running completely empty. The few unmanned aerial vehicles launched in recent days are actually a bitter evidence of the last gasps and depleting stocks Hezbollah has left. It is strategically impossible for a militant force whose ammunition and money are exhausted to survive against one of the world's most modern armies, Israel. This situation proves how the cross-border empire of fear that Tehran built over decades by spending billions of dollars has collapsed like a paper tower with a single economic move. The financial collapse centered in Tehran has zeroed out the regime's regional depth by toppling all proxies in surrounding countries like dominoes. Hezbollah is no longer a powerful actor backed by massive state support. It is indistinguishable from a militia group that has run out of ammunition and been abandoned to its fate. Similarly, the Houthis in Yemen have buried themselves in strategic silence with the complete drying up of their funds, having largely lost their so-called attack capabilities in the Red Sea. These groups, who claimed for days they would stop global trade to defend Iran, have bitterly realized their ammunition has run out after launching a few off-target rockets. The reason they offered is bare. Our targets are running out. We are not getting any support from the Islamic regime in Iran. The technological support and ammunition shipments coming by sea from the Iranian Revolutionary Guards have completely stopped due to the American blockade and lack of money. The Houthis, far from joining a global war, have been forced to count their last bullets, even in their own local conflicts. When Israel's undisputed military superiority on the ground combines with the economic strangulation launched by the UAE, Iran's Ring of Fire strategy has turned into a hell that burns itself. These militant groups, whose financial arteries are cut, will soon erupt into leadership infighting and dissolve, fragmenting from within due to lack of logistical support. The era in which the regime used these external apparatuses to blackmail the West is definitively over. The parasites are condemned to perish along with the host. This regional collapse opens a historic opportunity window for Gulf countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE. It creates the perfect ground for them to strengthen their own security architectures. Saudi Arabia views the knife-sharp cutoff of Iranian funding to the Houthis, who have long threatened its security, as a major strategic victory. As the Gulf countries see the success of this economic operation led by the UAE, they are tightening the regional bloc against Iran further and moving toward complete integration. The disintegration of the regime's proxy networks is permanently shifting the power balance in the Middle East in favor of rational, stability-seeking states. Iran has realized far too late that its survival strategy of threatening neighbors has produced the exact opposite effect, uniting everyone against itself. The IRGC's asymmetric advantages on the field are now completely erased. The brutal realities of conventional and economic power have stepped in. Iran, having lost its proxies, is like a knight whose armor has shattered, defenseless, naked, and a direct target. This military and diplomatic checkmate has reduced the entire operational capacity of the Revolutionary Guards in the region to literally gone status. For Tehran, whose regional alliances are shattering, the last hope was the two great allies far away. That hope is gone too. Even Beijing and Moscow are about to turn their faces away. Even China and Russia are abandoning this sinking ship. China has been buying cheap black market oil from Iran for years by evading sanctions. 1.4 million barrels per day, discounted by $8 to $10 compared to Brent. As we showed in our previous analyses, the US has cut this flow at the global scale. CENTCOM turned back 34 ships. Indo-PACOM has begun tanker intervention in the Bay of Bengal. Now the UAE steps in. China's choice is simple: sanctioned, risky, dangerous Iranian oil, or legal, unlimited, stable UAE oil. Beijing will turn its face to the Gulf without hesitation. Share in the comments. To stay updated, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for choosing us.